patch is, I think, one of the stronger components that we're going to bring to bear as we, if you elect to go with the entire suite of products there. The operational rules, though, is probably one of the absolute strongest features of it, because, we showed compliance. That's doing a snapshot. Okay, here's a set of rules. Let me look at your machine, and you're either compliant or you're not compliant, right? I'm not causing anything to happen other than maybe an alert goes out. But with my operational rules, I can actually affect what happens on that device based on some rules that you set up, for example. So, for example, you may have a rule out here that says, let's go out and look at a security rule. That's not the one I want. In inventory management, right? So here's where we'll have one. If you're missing patches, we're going to, say those. We're going to automatically deploy those out there. Let's say that I wanted to create my own new rule, right? So I want to create a new operational rule. Now, by the way, there is a wizard to guide you through that. But I'm just going to let it default to 3 there and then say, okay, well, what do we want to do under this rule? And this is where you would then pick up and say, well, what I want to do is I need to add my steps of what we're evaluating and what we're going to do. And you see, we give you all these different types of categories up there, right? So maybe we're going to say, I want to create a rule that looks at a machine every time it checks in, and I want to disable USB storage rights, or more. Let's do it different. Let's say I want to be able to enable or disable Windows burning service, right? So I'll say that's the one that I want to pick. And says, what happens if you want to do this? And I'll just default to the yes there. So now I've got my new device over here, and what I've then got to do is saying, well, this rule should be evaluated on what device or what device group or what user group, but it's really just that simple to go out and do those, and then it will automatically take an action. So in this case, it'll actually disable the function on a machine. This is where, when we have this installed, for example, in our service desk, we can, while we're sitting there in the service desk, we can have it automatically deploy a piece of software to an end-user machine. So here's one that we created here to show an example of executing WinSCP. So we define the steps that anytime that we say, hey, push this application to somebody's machine, it will go and grab this operational rule, and the first thing it's going to do is install the package, then it's going to delete the install files, then we're done by doing that. So the operational rules are perhaps one of the more powerful things, and you're really unlimited in your imagination as far as how you can use this thing to really automate. And I think that's the key. A lot of things out there can do the inventory discovery, but I think our flexibility around patch and deployment and these compliance rules and operational rules are really what makes this product perhaps stand out a little bit. And it's also very efficient. We have clients out there that are managing 40,000 remote locations using this tool. It really scales and does well. And I want to leave some time for questions, but as you would expect, there are any number of reports that you're going to get right out of the box, including in that application usage. This is the demo system. I don't really have much data out there, but it's the things you would think of, right? Application usage, give me a report on all machines that are more than 3 years old, which we know we have that financial asset management tab. Give me just a list of what my OS distribution that I have out there, what my service pack distribution is, hardware summary list, and it can create the reports in a PDF or an HTML, however you want them to be out there. And you can save those out and run them, and you can also set up your own unique queries, which could also produce a report. But it's pretty fully functional right out of the box. So, high level, that's a great overview of the product. Distribute packages, distribute OSs. I've kind of pointed out to you in the slide deck that the OS imaging has actually been somewhat improved now, going to that single OSD manager. So if you'd like to, know more, do more of a dive on any one of these topics, just contact somebody here at RightStar, and we'll be happy to arrange a one-on-one and talk about your specific use cases that you have. And with that, Dick, I guess we will open it up for questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Roger. Great job. Now would be a good time to ask a question. There's a Q&A box, so all you have to do is hit the box and then type in the question, and we'll get to it. Let me start off, Roger. We talked a little bit about BCM, and we didn't really get into the difference between ADDM, but you did show which looked like some application dependency mapping, but I think it was really just sort of network management.
Correct. It was just what
yeah.
machine is hanging off of what network device. That's all it was doing. So let me address that in a little bit more detail. So BCM is meant for, managing the asset, right? I mean, it does the discovery, and that's all great, and the fact we get our CMDB populated, but the real power is now that I've got that agent on there, I can do things like push patches, push applications, do compliance statistics, do software license management. The other tool BMC had that used to be called ADDM, Atrium Discovery and Dependency Mapping, now thankfully having just been renamed BMC Discovery, it is an agentless only version of a discovery, and it's really meant for the data center. While it would find a client out there, it's really looking for what are running applications on the device, which is always indicative of a server, not always indicative of a client device. So it goes out, does the discovery, finds everything that's out there, and again, it's Windows, it's Linux, it's AIX machines, it's whatever you have in your environment. But the real power of ADDM and how it's distinguished from BCM is that once I see what's out there, I start to watch the communications that are going on, right? So I can see that I have this server, it's constantly have these two front-end web servers that seem to be sending information to it. And then the other special part of it is that we have profiles of over thousands of applications. We have what's known as patterns. So if we're out there and we see a machine, we see it's communicating, but we know that that's an Exchange server application because we've got a pattern and we can recognize that. And we can see that those two front-end servers that keep pushing data to it, they're running IIS because we recognize the pattern for IIS. So now that we can identify what are the applications running on the various devices, and now how are they communicating with one another, ultimately what we're going to get is a software dependency mapping that this hardware is dependent on this hardware, and this software running on this device talks to a software running on this other device. And you start, and I'll use the analogy of email, I start to see that, okay, I've got two clustered Exchange servers hitting, a number of, front-end mid-tier servers doing that. And, if you're an old shop, maybe you've got a BES server running out there for the old Blackberries. And I can then determine, what are the upstream, downstream dependencies, what NIC card has what port open talking to the application on the other machine. And then ultimately what you would do is once the physical and logical dependencies were done, at the very top you would say, oh, this is my email service. So that now when you're in something like change management and somebody wants you to apply a patch to a server, you can very quickly, at a glance, a single push of a button, or get a visual representation of everything that's running on the device, whether it has a single point of failure, right, because I can see whether it's part of a cluster or a standalone machine. I can see what all applications are running on it, and it really gives you that greater insight into the topology of your applications themselves. So that's the difference, and it's always agentless. It's not pushing patches. It will tell you what patches are out there. It will do more in-depth discovery of storage devices, right? Your network-attached storage and your LUNs that you've got out there. It will tell me things like whether my OS is going to go out of support. It can bring back statistics around power consumption and all, which are statistics that the manufacturers publish and they import into that. So again, think of it as your data center tool for that kind of management.
Okay, Roger, thank you. Here's a question. Can you describe how to upgrade to Windows 10 using BCM, and I have to say I've been on Windows 10 now for several months and really like it. So I could see why they're asking the question.
I do too.
Yeah.
So at the abbreviated level, because obviously there are little steps of backing up and taking a snapshot and all of those things. But basically, what happens is you select the image that you're going to want to use. You're going to take those machines, and again, keep in mind from the slide deck, you can now do this via a USB stick if you want to. But you're going to basically bring that machine up. You know, typically we'll use a Pixie boot if we want to do that. Bring it up in a really pristine state. You will then, once I get into Pixie, you will lay the image there. You will go out and grab all of the drivers that are pertinent for that machine, and then you basically lay that out there using, you know, your OSD manager that you've got within there. And it's a pretty prescribed process that you would do, and of course you can have different versions of the image depending on what somebody wants. There is also then a complementary tool that's not part of BCM, but if you're concerned about migrating all of the personality settings that user may have had, like, you know, their Microsoft Office preferences for fonts and default apps and default drives, all of their browser favorites and settings, we've actually got a little add-on that we can talk to you about too that will grab all of those personality traits and migrate those over once that image has been laid down, so that when you ultimately turn that machine over to that new user, they think from at least where is everything at that it's pretty much the way it was before, and you get a lot of satisfaction there. We actually have, I believe we actually have a short YouTube video on actually doing the OS deployment. I'll see if Val can find that link, and we'll post that out there for you folks as well.
Okay. Thanks, Roger. And when you talk about personality traits, you mean like your favorites in your web browser, right?
Exactly. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is, what's the level of effort to get BCM up and running?
If you are a typical customer, right, with the fear of always saying something like that, but if you're a typical customer, if you wanted to implement, have us trained, do a deployment of testing of a number of machines, get you trained on all the modules, including deployment, it's 14 days. And of course, if you didn't need all of those, the basic admin training is like 3 days, and then it's really about 2 days per module, right? So if you want to learn how to do inventory and remote control, it's a couple of days to get it configured. We'll go out and discover your machines, get the agent rolled out there. Same thing on compliance manager. If you want to learn how to set those up, we do it, half a dozen of those to your boxes. It's about a couple of days to do it, test it, and validate it. So think about the number of modules, it's about 14 days in total if you do all modules. And if you want a breakdown of only, a la carte modules, just get in touch with us and we'll be happy to give you that.
Well, speaking of a la carte, that's the next question, and it says, how is BCM sold? Is it by a suite or a la carte?
It can be done both ways. Obviously, at some point in time, if you buy more than 2 or 3, and then I don't do pricing, but you can get with your sales rep. At some point in time, it's just, you may as well buy the suite if you're going to pay for the individual applications. And the price break is probably at 2 or 3 of the modules. I'm not exactly sure, but we have a number of people, of course, who only care about the inventory and remote control, and that's what they buy, and they go with it. And because maybe they're using some other tool to do patch and they're happy with it. You don't have to do it. I think there are advantages to having it all encompassed because, again, keep in mind what I said, that when I'm if you happen to be using a BMC help desk, all of this functionality you've seen me do within here, as I am the help desk agent sitting there in a ticket in Footprints or Remedy Force, I can do all of the stuff I showed you today from within the ticket. So it really gives that service desk agent a lot of power to respond immediately and thoroughly to that user's dilemma. But again, a la carte or as a suite.